I try not to put myself in the stories. Some stories require me to be a part of it because I am there and it is in the place that the storyteller is part of the story that I lay my trap. For the 12th night, I have my friends over. We had spent weeks planning this party, and it is going to be a fun one. We have set up the tree outside with fairy lights and ornaments. Each one of them is decorated by a guest, with Marceline's painted ornaments taking up a lot of space on the tree. There are even some ornaments hanging around on the inside. There are boxes outside, but they're purely decorative with the gift boxes indoors. Everyone has brought a gift for everyone else, and there are a lot of different foods and drinks. Adance's lumpia is quite popular, as is Marceline's gumbo. One of my sisters brought seafood, another made bread, and one made cheesecake. Although the most popular food item is my mother's mashed potatoes. The feasting happens all day, and there is so much joy and excitement in everyone's tone. Until the sun went down. When the night arrives, I reluctantly say goodbye to my sisters and my mother as they head home, and I promise them that I will try to see them the next day. They know that I will do my best, but we all know that best effort is not the same thing as guaranteeing it will happen. Now it is just me, myself, Adonce, Marceline, Ava, and Fallen Grace left in the house. Now our traditions look very different as we play loud music and we place out a glass of sherry and cookies out for our nocturnal visitor. We sing along with the songs, careful to only use sign language to communicate, even as our words say something else. To anyone who listens to us, it looks like we are talking about cookies and gifts tomorrow. To someone who watches us signing, they will see we are talking about something very different. Adanse is the only child among us, but she is not the same Adanse as the Marquess of Madness. She is only a girl among us. Alice before Wonderland, the match girl stuck in the snow, a Baggins in Bag End. She had so much fun feasting with us. She had fun with her aunts and even getting to see her grandmother, who she likes to call Dragon. When the night was done and my family went home, I spent my last few waking hours with Adanse and my friends. I had seen Adanse many times across the years, when I visited the pumpkin house, when I left home for the first time, when I interviewed her for stories, when I met her father, and when she told me about her past and her future and the role I play in both. Although that is a story for another time, if I do survive this night. This Adanse was from before she found Lockhart, when she was just a young girl exploring Mount Toba 75,000 years ago, still dressed in saber fur, and who loved seeing the rabbits hopping around the house, and who hugged every stuffed animal there was. She had spent most of her night painting with her dragon and baking for the first time in her life. Her eyes lit up when she ate bread and cookies. She made a big mess in both the studio and the kitchen, but no one was upset at her. It was just good to see her happy again. Although we did have to keep Ava separated because even knowing that this Adanse wasn't the same Adanse that Ava once knew, the feelings are still raw and she deserved peace on this night too. So fortunately her girlfriend Fallen Grace kept her company and acted as a mediator. Still, all too soon, Adanse grew tired and we had her set out the cookies and sherry for the Winterman, and she was tucked in, and a kiss was laid on her head as we left the living room she was resting in. The fireplace was still burning, but the fire was dying as we approached to midnight. I went to the drawing room with my friends, and we continued talking in low tones so she could hear our voices as she is comforted to sleep, and we have set out our trap. Red Prince sits to my right with her jacket ready, and she sips on hot chocolate while we wait to hear the rattle of chains and the crunch of snow. Fallen Grace is holding Ava close and they chat quietly. Their conversation meant only for themselves, but they seemed happiest that way. Then there was me, my hand shaking as I sip at the rare mug of coffee. I rarely touch both coffee and alcohol, but on this night, I decided to allow the exception for coffee as I try to ease my nerves. I keep telling myself that Adonce will be safe, and she will always be safe. Except in my heart, I know that isn't necessarily true. And finally, there was myself. Or maybe not myself? Close enough. Across from me is a near identical version of myself, with the same long hair, same face mask with pink flowers, and even the same mug of coffee. Although that version of myself had golden eyes behind their glasses, and they weren't from here. From what I knew from the story they told me, they were a different me from a different world, a world without seven cities, a frightening world where it feels like honor is punished and where they only have their mother and no one else. They got trapped in elsewhere and they're trying to find their way home. They have traveled to many different places, but they still haven't found their way home, even though their mother is still looking for them. Although calling them myself will get confusing, so I think I will just call them Daya. They came to help set at this trap because even though they're from a different place, we are still family, and they wanted to be welcome in a home this year. They got to spend time with sisters they never had, and they got to spend time with a different version of their mother, and of course, they got to spend time with Adonce. In the last few minutes before midnight, there is silence as we wait for midnight to arrive. This trap is very careful, but has to be very deliberate. He has spent thousands of years avoiding being captured, and he has avoided powerful deities and near omnipotent monsters. So he was prepared against them. So our trap had to be set by people too insignificant for him to notice, like an exoteric human, two esoteric women, one extraordinary fairy, a worn wanderer, and a journalist. Insignificant, lowly beings that were something too negligible for the necromancer to notice, or another term that we shared among ourselves, heroes. When midnight arrives, the power fades and turns off as we hear the sound of chains outside the house. Red puts on her glasses and Falling Grace flies into the darkness holding her girlfriend. Dia slides into the darkness, the role taking a lot of focus, but would take them elsewhere. Now it was my place, as I opened the door and I stepped outside to meet the Winterman, while everyone got into position. Hello! Oh, you must be the Winterman, I say to the man in the red coat, as I finally saw the Necromancer in person for the first time ever. He stood taller than I expected, and most of his face was covered by his white beard, and I could see he wore a bird's skull on his nether necklace, and that he did indeed carry a staff made of bone. At a glance, it looked like a white staff with glowing golden jewels on the top. Whether it was a glamour or just human nature that hid its true nature, I am not sure, but still I could see the individual bones on the staff. I could see the bones because I was expecting to see them. They were crudely held together by sinew that was thousands of years old, and the cranium that capped the staff had two golden eyes in the sockets that still glowed even after all of these years. A staff that was made from the bones of a goddess, and the eyes that were stolen from demigod twins. The bones made him immune to the wrath of the gods, and the eyes made the gods blind to him. Even time was blind to him. Despite knowing all of this, I kept a wide smile on my face, and I approached the vile man with no hesitation and no fear, keeping my feelings of revulsion and disgust to myself as I approached him. For this to work, I would have to be the one who came outside to meet him. As I approached, I saw him squint his eyes behind his glasses as he examined me. I had no weapons, I had no power. I was an exoteric human. I didn't possess esoteric energy, and I clearly didn't know who he was because what kind of crazy person would willingly approach the necromancer if they knew who he was? I approached him and I extended out my left hand to shake his gloved hand. He took my hand, switching his staff from the left hand to the right hand. His sleigh was carved from a single piece of redwood. The wood was smooth and the inside of the sleigh was lined with fur on the floor, but the seats were leather, with straps also made of leather. The back seat had two large but empty burlap sacks that looked out of place for the luxury of the sleigh. There was gold filigree in the wood, and it even plated the skis. There were lanterns on the front, but they weren't lit, since even though the night was cold in National City, it doesn't snow here, although the sleigh always arrives with the sound of crunching snow. The reindeer were massive and very different from the necromancer's sleigh. Their fur was white as the snow, and they all possessed slightly red antlers, with eyes that were also red. Again, at a glance, you would think they were large and albino reindeer, but are otherwise normal creatures. Up close to them, you can see that they are suffering. Just beneath the fur, patches of skin are bruised and bloody. Their mouths are muzzled, and the muzzles have been on there so long that the skin is starting to grow over it, and the releases are permanently rusted shut. They stand on legs that are broken, with bone peeking through broken skin. And the important part about all of this is to pretend I didn't notice any of the odd things, and instead play the role of an excited and starstruck parent enthralled by the appearance of the Winterman, one he has seen many times and one he isn't afraid of. "Let me help you into my house. My daughter will be so excited to see you," I tell the necromancer as I help him out of his sleigh, not giving him a chance to switch his staff back to his left hand. And sure enough, he limps out of the sleigh, adjusting to his new hand position. "Oh, ho, ho! Let's meet the young lady," the Winterman said, as he grabbed a burlap sack with his left hand and he limped towards the door just behind me. This moment is so delicate it needs to happen perfectly, and if it fails, we may not live long enough to try for a second chance. I open the door and I touch the iron key hanging on my door frame, and then I step inside of the dark house. Only the dim embers of the fireplace lit the room, but you could see someone lying on the couch underneath the blanket. I stepped inside and stood aside, giving the winter man room to enter. As he crossed the threshold, and he lost his footing, falling down and losing his grip on his walking stick as it went flying through the hallway and into the living room, less than 2 meters from the fireplace. It was a quick action, a carefully deliberated accident where an ancient legend collides with an old superstition. A story so old that most of the modern world has forgotten, but to someone as ancient as the necromancer, it is too modern for him to have ever heard of. Sometimes evil just falters and falls when it crosses your doorway, and when you're gripping your staff in a hand you're not used to holding it in, it's very easy to lose your grip when you fall. It separates the necromancer from his staff. While he certainly doesn't hold it all of the time, he wasn't expecting to be separated from it at this time, and it left him vulnerable. For the first time in over a century, the gods could see him again, and for the first time in tens of thousands of years, he was vulnerable to the gods of Altis. There was a chill as a frigid breeze shut the door behind him, and he struggled to his feet. "I can get the staff for you," I said as I stepped to where the staff was in the near complete darkness. The necromancer had his doubts by now, but he was not immediately hostile as he heard me step away, and I grabbed his staff. The bones weren't smooth. They were rough and they were dry. The eyes in the skull stared at me as I held the skull up to my face, and I could hear the necromancer clear his throat. My staff, please, he said in a voice that said he didn't expect to be disobeyed. I glanced up to where he was on the other side of the living room, and I lifted the staff up as Dia stepped forward from the shadows. Identical to me, and in the dark their eye color was hidden as they grabbed the staff and stepped back into the darkness, taking the staff from the necromancer and taking it elsewhere. The web was spun, and now the necromancer knew that there was a problem. Staff gone, he was now all in one place, unable to slip through time and shadow to vanish. He was physically trapped here, and the power of the staff could not be used by him, but that did not make him helpless by any means. You tricked me. I will have your head, he said as he reached into his burlap sack to pull out a very large blade. A sword so large he had to use two hands to swing it towards me, only for me to stand still as the sword approached me, and I had to stay still. The necromancer was ancient and powerful. He didn't see threats from anyone who didn't have power, and when he did see you as a threat, he got tunnel vision. He didn't notice the markings of salt on the floor, nor the sigils of silver hanging from the walls, nor, most ominously, the mistletoe with white berries on the plate of cookies. He stepped forward into the salt, where his skin sizzled and he screamed as he fell forward, dropping his sword beyond the salt. While salt could stop many dangerous things, the layers of immortality and contracts on the necromancer's body and soul left him practically unkillable. However, unkillable did not mean the same thing as invulnerable, as the flames burned his coat away, revealing his tattoos beneath his coat. Tattoos of serpents, chains, screaming faces, and lots that still moved and squirmed beneath his skin. The flames dancing across his skin burned it, only for it to be healed in less than a second. But the pain and surprise was enough for him to fall to his hands and knees, and for Fallen Grace to fly from the shadows, as she grabbed the leather necklace from around his neck, and she flew forward. Even in pain, he reached forward, trying to grab the bird skull, as Fallen Grace flew it into the dying light of the fireplace. The necklace caught fire easily in the weak fire, as the fire burned from a weak red to a bright blue nearly instantly. The flames of the demiurge burned the unholy locust, the fire from LCL eager to have something that could be burned. The necromancer, ever stuck into his tunnel vision, crawled towards the blue and white flames as he reached into the fire, only to withdraw his right hand, now burned down to the bone that fell to the floor, bursting into ash in a moment. A wound that he did not start healing from. The locust increased his power and gave him the means to possess others if they put on the necklace. Normally, it is nearly impossible to destroy, but its unholy nature was like an extremely powerful acid. But what happens to an acid when you pour it into a high pH base? You neutralize it. His objects of power gone, he reached into his sack again, only to find that there was nothing inside of it. The sigils of silver around the room glowed lightly. They sealed away any access to the baths, so the items that the bags led to were still where they came from, but they weren't stored in the bags. They were stored somewhere else entirely, with just the bags acting as a way to connect to his stockpile in the Palace of Bone. Even though the sigils sealed the paths off, they did not stop the necromancer from accessing help that he carried with himself in a more traditional summoning. He grabbed some of his blood from his right stump as he drew a sigil on the ground, not one meant to call something forth, but one to act as a key for a lock that was already on the necromancer's body. In modern terms, he was blocked from accessing the internet, but he wasn't blocked from accessing anything he already downloaded. One of his tattoos on his right arm, which resembled a lock held together by both chains and snakes, opened, and from the sigil rose a bloody figure, hunched over, about the size of a rabid raccoon. The creature's organs were exposed, and it was eyeless, with only smooth flesh covering its eyes. The hands were more claw-like, however, it didn't growl, it didn't howl, it cried like a newborn infant. Around the creature's neck was a long chain connecting it to the Winterman's flesh. And this was why I was essential to this fight. The Necromancer had many different minions he could call upon, and my friends needed someone who could quickly identify whatever was being summoned before it had a chance to attack. The exposed organs, sharp claws, and even the infant-like cries were a clue to the creature's identity. One of Bathory's children, the Poronets. While the creature adjusted to being alive again, I grabbed an ornament from the indoor tree, and I threw it at the creature, which wailed again in that eerie cry as it clutched at the ornament and refused to move, even as the Necromancer pulled on its chain. Poronets are very aggressive creatures. However, they recognize their mother's crest on the ornament. So now the monster did not dare harm me nor anyone in my household. Their love for their mother was far greater than their bloodlust. Now, very angry, the necromancer gathered more of his blood and threw it in 3 different places. More locks unlocked on his skin as his blood now smoked and sizzled. And from the smoke rose 3 different figures with moss coating their legs, and they all held long-handled axes with a single hand, and I could hear them whistling. "Forest fiends!" I yelled out, and the dying flames of the fireplace relit with flames burning bright and red as the fiends retreated from the flames. The fire was lit by the Red Prince, who was still unseen by the Winterman, as in desperation he opened the last lock on his body. A lock held over his heart as he bled from both his mouth and eyes as he summoned his final creature. It crawled out of the blood like it was a tunnel, and I could see the revenant that rose from the blood. He still looked somewhat human. He was covered in scratches and cuts, but they had partially healed over and sealed over. His hair was long, tangled, and full of scabs. His clothes looked like something from the end of the Great War, and around his neck was an old-fashioned pair of headphones, and he gurgled as he spoke a single word. He whispered as the necromancer grabbed him by his hair, pulling him back as the revenant tried to seal his mouth shut. "Revenant!" I yelled out into the darkness as Ava ran out of the hallway to break the Winterman's arm as she freed the revenant from the grasp, and she pressed his head into the fire. The revenant did not struggle. He accepted his immolation as the fires burned away his vocal cords and in time would burn away his brain, freeing him from his curse. "Rest well, Robert. We couldn't have done it without you," I said as I turned to the necromancer. "Now down a hand." His other arm broken, unable to access his bag of tricks, out of allies, and out of options. "Surrender, Winterman. You have nothing else," I told him as he stared defiantly up at me. "I am not out of tricks yet," he said, his bloodshot eyes staring up at me as he bit his tongue and he spat his blood towards me. I dodged out of the way quickly enough as it splattered behind me. "That's enough. It's over," I said as I grabbed the mistletoe and stabbed the twig into his stump, as the Winterman let out a final howl and he collapsed on the floor. I should probably explain. The Necromancer had many different forms of protection and immortality, one of which was based on the story of Balder, who was protected from fire and water, iron and all metals, stone and earth, from trees, sickness and poisons. and from all four-footed beasts, birds, and creeping things. Although he was still vulnerable to mistletoe, which was not any of those things. So even though the Winterman still lived, he had less layers of immortality protecting him, and the pain was finally enough to cause him to pass out. In the end, what defeated him was his own arrogance, the fact he was certain that no one would figure out how to get past his protections, and that the only threats were from the powerful. Now he was defeated. I was relieved for a second until I heard movement behind me. I turned slowly and I saw what the Winterman's blood hit. Adansi sat up with blood on her face, and when I saw her gray eyes and spiderweb veins in her skin, my fists clenched, my heart jumped, and I saw red. Adansi is only given a single day each year to live as a human being. A single day to be human, to live, to be a child, not to be a goddess of Lockhart. However, because she only lived for a single day, that meant that she died at midnight. I had to trick the Winterman into the house with a dead child that no matter how meaningful I made her too few hours of life, it always feels like I could have done more, no matter how many times I tried. And the Necromancer, in his final waking moments, decided to turn her dead body against me. In my rage, I was too angry to speak as Adanse reached up with her hands as she leaned towards me, her hands reaching for my neck, and I was too angry to even recognize what she was now, let alone being able to say what she was out loud. Her fingers were curled into claws, her spidery veins spread out from her jaws, and her open mouth let out a long moan with her bacterial-filled blood pooling on her tongue. She was suffering, even after her death, and I was too angry to do anything about it as she took a hesitant step towards me. Fortunately, my friends came to my aid while I was lost in my rage at the necromancer's crime. The Red Prince stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder as she spoke. Her words echoed through the room, collapsing all of the undead and reducing them all to ash.
In Yahweh's eyes, you have earned your rest.
She said, as Adanse was reduced to ash in front of me, leaving nothing behind that I could bury. I would have to vacuum up her remains along with the remains of all the other undead the Necromancer summoned. Although he still laid on the floor, another layer of immortality was gone, but still so many to go. While we processed what was happening, there was a knock on the door. Birthstone opened the door, and she let whoever was outside inside. Dia stood alongside Adanse. Dia quietly observed the body as they altered the sigil to open a path to a cell to keep the Necromancer, a place better equipped to keep the Necromancer. While that happened, Adanse started to speak to us, and I had a surreal moment of mourning the undead. Adanse, the human, died in my home, then was brought back to life as a sufferer of SAMD syndrome. Then she was reduced to ashes in front of me by the power of a goddess of death. I could smell her ash. I could taste it on my tongue, and her remains stained my hands and my clothes. And yet Adanse stood before me, the goddess, uncaring about her body and not caring about the fact that she was being mourned. She had a job to do, and I was not supposed to mourn her since she wasn't dead. Her body dies every year, so why does it hurt every time? Glad to see the Necromancer is captured. The warden in Black Moon Prison will be quite pleased. Our mission is not finished yet. We still have to take the Palace of Bone, Dauncey said, and everyone else nodded, while I looked down at my ash-covered hands. I was useful here because I was bait, and I knew about the summons and abilities of the Necromancer. I wasn't going to be useful in the attack. Before I had a chance to sit down and start cleaning the ashes, Adonse held my hand for a second. I appreciate what you did tonight, but we need you just a little longer. Can you please join us in the attack? She asked me, and I glanced around at the others, and they were all looking at me eagerly. I was being asked to help, but I didn't think I was that special of a person. No powers, no secret weapons, not even any interesting secrets. And yet the Marquess of Madness wanted to have me join her on an assault, the Palace of Bone. She asked me to join her, and all I could think about was to tell her yes, I would join. We exited the front door, which led to a place of frozen ice and with skies as dark as coal. And yet I was not cold, as we saw the many factories and the Palace of Bone in the middle of it all. We weren't alone, far from it. I could see thousands of people lined up to attack the Winterman's workshop. Some of them I recognized, others I did not. Some were from history, some were from possible futures, and most were from the present. I could see Birthstone glancing towards Adonse, full of questions, full of anger, and full of fear. She was exiled by Adonse once, and the two of them never spoke since then. Even when Adonse entered my home, she ignored Birthstone, refusing to look at or even say excuse me to Birthstone. I knew that broke Birthstone's heart, but that was something that was not my place to explain, let alone fix. Still, I could never imagine saying no to Adonse's request to join the attack on the workshop. Even as we discuss where to attack, where I'm looking over a map with the Killer of Kemet and the Witch Boy, Rosin Autumn Ashes act against an interpreter for Asclepius, and sitting next to the actual explorer from all those centuries ago. I stood with legends, and they respected my input on the plans. However, even if I was just a foot soldier, I would have told Adonse yes. Wouldn't you have told your daughter yes if she asks you for help?